All right, guys, welcome back to the Warrior Unfiltered podcast. This is episode 16. So we've got obviously Lewis with us, and also we have a special guest who has already been on the podcast. I don't even know what episode that was, but we've got Darren back with us. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you? Yeah, our podcast was one of the first episodes.
I
It must
think
have
it
been
might
at
have been
least.
like the third or fourth one in.
Yeah,
That was the
yeah, it must have
Q&A
been at
one.
least. Yeah, never listened to that
Um,
back though.
yeah, again, we don't have Henry or Bill with us, so it was kind of a last minute request from Darren to join us. So thank you for joining us, Darren. We appreciate that.
My
And hopefully
pleasure.
get a couple appearances from Dash throughout.
Yeah, you'll probably hear him halfway through. He'll probably start squealing or something
Yeah.
as he
So
does.
today's topic of discussion, lads, I think we'll move on to how far does genetics take someone? I think before we actually get into the meat and potatoes of the discussion, just wanted like an introduction. Obviously, Darren, what's your plans at the moment? What you've been up to?
So well, I'll break it down. In 2023, I went off to America for 5 months basically. So from May till October, I was away without training. Come back in October and just kind of got back into it as you normally would, like training like bodybuilding standard. Still eating like a bodybuilder and stuff. Didn't know whether I wanted to compete again because I was quite getting back into my football, but over the period of time, it's kind of clicked into my head that I do want to compete again for that redemption. But so I think this year is like a sit the year out, and then 2025 is probably going to be the time that I will compete again.
Oh, so you're going to take this year off, yeah?
Yeah, I'm gonna take this year off and then go in 2025.
Nice. So I thought obviously the relevancy of bringing yourself on, Darren, is the grand reveal, drum roll, Darren being
Oh,
natural. So obviously
I know
with
it's a
myself and Lewis
surprise.
being assisted, it would be nice to get your perspective as well, obviously being natural. So I thought obviously the pertinent of it to the topic of discussion. So genetic potential, who wants to start off? How far does genetics really take someone? Because obviously we always hear, that person's gifted, they've got really good genetics, or you often hear the other end of the spectrum. It's, do I have the potential to be a good bodybuilder? Do I have the genetics? So, like, how do we even identify genetics, and how far can it take somebody?
Um, well, obviously, it's just the natural. Well, it's the ability of that person, given their genetic makeup, to go as far as possible. I think when it comes to bodybuilding, genetics is everything. Um, Obviously, hard work plays a massive part, and I do think hard work beats lazy genetics. Someone lazy with good genetics.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if you've got someone who's going to work hard with genetics, they will always surpass anyone, whatever level you're at, whether natty or enhanced. I mean, like you look at someone like, obviously it's a bit out of our realm, like Ronnie Coleman. He
Yeah.
was an Olympian, completely natural. For 99.9% of the population, never going to happen, impossible. You can't even win a national show being completely enhanced.
Yeah.
How you deal with supplementation, how your body responds to enhancement, everything really, even down to like your digestion, everything is genetics.
Yeah.
So I think as an outlier, it is everything.
Yeah. Obviously, it's inherently advantageous for somebody who has superior genetics in comparison to the other one. But then I would say the caveat is there's always that level field of being advanced with good genetics, but up until the point where it's an even playing field, and I say, excluding the exceptions of Ronnie Coleman, Jay
Yeah,
Cutler, and all
indeed.
those sort of people, but I think once you get up to the pro ranks as an IFBB pro, that's when it becomes more of an even playing field. But at the amateur ranks, you can have this big discrepancy from somebody who is significantly genetically gifted and somebody who's just not at all or relatively genetically gifted, but that's just inheritant.
Yeah.
Um, your take, Darren?
I think it's pretty much spot on. I think to be honest, like any IFBB pro, majority of them are there because of their genetics. It's not there because of, like, there is hard work to it, but obviously once, like you said, once you get into the pro league, there's that even playing field of everyone's genetics is on another level. And it is the kind of the same for natural as well. So like the people who win the regionals, the people who win like the amateur Olympiads and stuff like that, you can tell they have the ability and they have a natural genetic over everyone else. And that's life, unfortunately. Like, so you dealt with what you dealt with. So I agree fully with both your points.
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if this would be an interesting one for you to actually come back to with an answer. Do you think it's clearer at a natural level who is genetically gifted and who works hard? Just because obviously at an enhanced level, genetics come into play, but obviously you've got levels of enhancement, time of enhancement, obviously dosages and things like that, all the different intricacies in between. Whereas at a natural level, without going into the science of, you know, certain health conditions which may result in lower testosterone or higher testosterone, do you think the playing field's so much more leveled, it's actually easier to spot someone with a genetic gift?
I don't.
Yeah, I do think so. I think you can spot, especially the top tier level naturals. You can spot it from a mile away. So there's people like, I don't know if you're too aware of them, people like Adam Powell and Keithy West and
Yeah, I
people
know
like that.
Adam Powell.
Okay,
You can you can see them and you can just look at them and go, okay, you are, like, your genetics are a big part in this, and you're just naturally, like, the way that they store muscle as a natural, it's not easy. So like when they're storing that much muscle and then they're bringing the condition as well on stage, and like it is one of the things where you look at them and go, you have got genetics there. And I'm sure if they were to go onto the enhanced side, you would see that 100%.
Yeah, it will just
yeah,
amplify their
Yeah,
already existing genetics that they have.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree as well that it's a lot easier to identify it. Obviously, you see it more within their training as well because obviously they don't have that assistance. So the only thing they can rely on is like hard work. That's not undermining that people who are assisted don't work as hard or if not harder, but they have to work extremely hard because they have nothing else. Lewis, obviously not yourself or me, but you'll get a lot of people who are using the anabolic androgenic steroids and they're thinking, well, that's going to do all the work for me. So I'm
yeah,
going to be lazy with everything else. So yeah, I think it's a lot easier to identify within the naturals because obviously I've seen Adam Powell. He's been down Crayford a couple of times, and I saw it
Yeah.
in person. And I mean, no disrespect to him, but the first time I saw him, I was thinking, there's no way he could be natural. And then
Mm.
Keefe as well. I know Keefe relatively well. I've seen him at a couple of expos, and again, you look at him, you're thinking it's not plausible for that person to be natural.
No, especially like Keithy gets it a lot just because of the pure deadlifts, like just
Yeah,
because of the strength of the
was
guy, he
literally
gets it
about,
all
I
the time.
mean, I don't know Adam. Obviously I've seen Keefe on Instagram,
yeah,
and like, look, deadlifts are like, that's porn to me anyway.
yeah.
So just seeing his lifts, like it's
The
insane.
Adam's not so much as dense as Keefe is, but if you just look at his structure, how he brings in condition, how everything's put together on his physique, it's just absolutely phenomenal. It's
Yeah.
really exquisite to look at. And obviously he's really young. How old
Well,
do you know?
he's already won the amateur Olympia,
Oh,
and I'm
really?
pretty sure I think he's around the same age as me. I think he's around 26.
There you go.
But like it's ridiculous. Like it's just the whole structure of him is just crazy, and he's like a really good height for it as well. I'm pretty sure he's like 5'8", 5'9".
Yeah.
So he just compacts it very well.
Yeah. So going back to your question, Lewis, I think it is a lot easier to identify it
Yeah.
at a natural level. But I think a key point to really emphasize on is when you're looking at the genetic potential, there are people who have that advantage inherently over other people, but it can never undermine the hard work that's still needed in order to get there because these people are genetically gifted. They can get away to an extent with doing a little bit less, but they still have to put in work, if that makes sense. A lot of the
Yeah.
time, we know on social media, you get it all the time. Oh, he's only that size because he's taking all this gear. It's like
Hmm.
you don't see everything else that happens behind closed doors. You still have to put the work in. Um,
Well, it's almost like
Anything else?
we touched on it last week. I think like the badge of honor. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I do this much card. I finished prep on this much cardio. I think it's sometimes it's the reverse is, or what gear are you on? That's always the question. What are you taking? No one
Wait.
asks how you training. No one asks what you're eating, what your routines like, what your sleep's like, what your recovery's like, what your supplementation's like. It's always that one, the
Well,
holy grail question.
the quintessential example there is what Darren just said about Keefe.
Yeah.
The amount of people that look at Keefe and just go, well, he must be on steroids. But it's like,
Yeah.
ask all the other questions. What are you doing apart from that one question of what's your stack? What are you doing with your nutrition? What are you doing with your training? What are you doing with your sleep? What are you doing with your stress management? Blah, blah, blah. Ask those questions. So
Yeah.
it kind of, coincides with what you're saying, but then also contrary to that, it's relatively hard to identify more so if they're natural, because as soon as you see somebody who is as gifted as Keefe, it's the steroid card being played.
Yeah.
So it's
I'd like to see his
Yeah.
blood work. I'd love to see his blood work.
see what? Sorry.
Just love to see his blood work, just to see where he actually sits.
Yeah.
No, but how interesting it would be just to see where his markers would lie. Obviously, blood work doesn't give the full story, but I think it'd be interesting to see it, just to see like where his actual natural tests at and stuff like that, in comparison to say like AJ or Darren or just another natural athlete or a generic pool of natural athletes, just to see where his genetics sit.
Yeah. Yeah. So also kind of to coincide with what we were saying about hard work goes into it as well. What else do you both think goes into truly establishing somebody's genetic potential besides just the hard work?
Do you know what? I was actually reading about. I actually did a post about this yesterday. So obviously, like a lot of my work is with females as well.
Yeah.
And I was actually doing a lot of research on polycystic ovary syndrome.
Yeah, I did see that post.
Um, and the fact that like they did studies across sports women in general, particularly competitive sports athletes, or female sports athletes,
Yeah.
and the hyperandrogenism that condition can leave you with. That although they're completely natural, a lot of their natural testosterone levels were actually higher than enhanced female athletes.
Yeah.
But you still come across as natural. So it's like again medical conditions. Although most people would consider it a negative, in the realm of bodybuilding, it would actually be quite a positive. And again, it comes under genetics in terms of how far you could go in the sport whilst remaining natural.
See, yeah, I don't know if I could be completely wrong here, but I'm not sure if I heard in like the Olympics, for an example, if you have a female with PCOS, I think they are disqualified because of their androgen levels. I could be completely wrong. I feel like I've heard something about that.
I haven't heard that.
I could be wrong. I feel like I've heard something along those lines, but I could, like I say, I could be completely wrong. But yeah, anything else, Darren?
Mate, honestly, like the way I just see genetics is how we spoke on the last one. Like, I just think it's down to like how quick they can put on muscle, how quick they can like go through a whole prep. And some people just it's easy for them. Like it's like any other sport. There are genetics where, like football, for example, there's the whole Messi Ronaldo debate. And Messi is pure genetics, and Ronaldo's hard work and does it outbeat it. But I haven't got another opinion on it. Like I think what you two touched on is sounds spot on, but I don't have any more
See, one that
info
I
on that.
wanted to chuck out there as well was the environment. The environment that you immerse yourself in plays a key role, because you could have somebody who has really good genetics, but if they're in the wrong environment, I don't feel like you're going to truly, strive for your potential, because you're not getting that kind of encouragement, that support, that push, that drive.
I also think
Yeah,
it's I think to confirm your point, I think AJ is a very good example.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say he's necessarily a genetic anomaly, but like the way he structures his day, the way he structures his routine, Like I know from people that know him how anal he is. Literally every minute of the day is meticulously planned out to
Yeah.
make sure his life is as like geared towards his goal as possible.
Yeah.
And I don't think if he didn't have that ability to be like that and do that, which also, again, I think that is genetic as well, um, he wouldn't be as good as he is if he didn't live so structured and so meticulously.
Yeah. Would you say that's also genetics? Like his mentality towards it, or would you say that's more his psyche, his mindset?
I think it's a combination of nature and nurture.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a child that's potentially intelligent, but you don't nurture it, they're not going to reach full potential. And I
Yeah.
think it's the same umbrella as that. I know how like meticulous you can be with certain things and how like in depth you go into your reading and things. I think although you've got the structure and the ability to sit there and read and want to learn, and you're obviously clearly nurtured to learn,
Yeah.
if you have that genetic desire to do so and that capacity to do so, I don't think you'd be the same.
Yeah. I think that's a valid point, to be fair. Don't know if there's anything else really to touch on in terms of genetic potential and how far it can really take you, unless you guys can think of anything.
Um, no.
No? You wanna
Nah.
Yeah. Well, we've rinsed that one. So end the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers for tuning up, Darren. See you on the
Bye.
next one. No, I think obviously it can somewhat segue us onto the next part of the episode, and that was how long should we remain natural until we take that leap into assistance, if we were even to take that leap? That's obviously why I wanted to bring you on, Darren. So the question I wanted to ask you first of all is, how long have you been natural in terms of since you've started your bodybuilding career?
So if we like, to be honest, well, since I've been training, I trained at like 17 years old. But if we're talking like how people say serious training, it's just after lockdown. So what was that, 21 or
22,
20? Is
20,
that 22?
sorry,
Just when
2020.
Yeah, so just after that is when the gyms basically started opening up again, is when I took it serious, because I was actually coached by AJ as soon as we come out of, well, when we went back into the gyms, but I just wasn't in the headspace to carry on with his training, to be honest, because it like you said, it was so meticulous that I just wasn't in the headspace for that. So realistically, yeah, it's been, well, coming up to 4 years this year.
Yeah.
Okay, just
So
jumping obviously like kind of what we touched on previously. Do you think your progression would have been different to where you are? Obviously, take away the break in America and football and stuff.
yeah.
You'd have stuck to that meticulous plan of AJ's. Do you think where you are now in your progression would have been different?
Oh, 100%. I think if I was as like, especially the past couple of years where I have been a little bit more meticulous in what I do, in terms of like recovery, meal timings and stuff like that. If I was with AJ, for sure, I would look 100% better than what I do now. I mean,
Yeah.
even when I was with Keefe, because I was coached by Keefe as well for a good year, and in that off season that we had for 4 or 5 months, I made some ridiculous progress.
Okay, so
So
obviously, like for us, if we were to say switch coaches, like I know me and Harry have had different coaches and we have our share of knowledge ourselves, you'll go to a different coach, enhanced. They might have different views on stack design, different views on how to incorporate, other compounds. In terms of, let's say, a comparison between like Keefe and AJ, who are both very well respected in the amateur game. What variables as a natural would they manipulate that's different in order to get the best potential out of an athlete?
so AJ I was only with for a short period of time. So AJ's was more the way everything was structured, down to like the sheets he used, everything, compared to Keefe was, it's gonna sound really harsh. Keefe's coaching was very basic, in the sense of Keefe would be like, here's your plan, check in every week, and it would just be a WhatsApp message, simple as that. It'd be a WhatsApp call. But Keefe's was more
Lewis,
along the
your
lines
your
of,
style is fairly similar to that as well, isn't it? Like all
I
through.
use Google, I use Google Sheets. I use a combination of the two. So I'll use Google Sheets for progress trackers, so I'll have like the daily tracker like
Yeah.
you do with your athletes.
Yeah.
Everything.
I wouldn't say in terms of it being disrespectful by saying it's basic. It's just it's person dependent. Some
Yeah,
people
I mean, it
get more
works. Like,
simplified.
This is
yeah,
why, like, this is why for me, for example, just jumping on that point, this is why I prefer WhatsApp response to Loom video. I just like everything in writing. So if a client wants to go back at their check-in, like obviously, do you do like the notes as well as the Loom video with yours? You
I
don't
just
just
do
do it.
all Loom.
Yeah. So like Dan, who coaches me, he'll do a brief summary on WhatsApp. Then there's also the same brief summary on the sheets on the calendar and a Loom video.
Hmm.
Whereas for me, it's easier for me just to be like, okay, I've got everything that I need there on Google Sheets, all the information I need. I'm just going to relay what I need to tell you back in voice note or like titled voice notes or WhatsApp messages, so they can go back through the week and be like, what was that again? What was that again? Without having to. I'm kind of like a hybrid between the two.
Yeah, I say
yeah.
it's better enough. And
But that's the thing. Like AJ, I know obviously AJ how he is. He's very meticulous with his sheets and everything. It probably has changed a lot since I was with him, because that was 2020, 2021, around that time. But yeah, Keithy's was very simple, like WhatsApp video, check-in, everything like that was done in one platform. But they actually are very similar in the way that they come across in terms of like recovery aspect. Keithy's just very different in terms of like the way he wants you to train. So he's very like his style is kind of old school with movements. So you'll have things like that people don't like nowadays or get criticized for, like T-bar rows and
I like Keith.
yeah, like barbell row. It'd be very old school basic, whereas AJ's was like
what would the V attachment?
yeah, with the close, yeah, with the V
Oh,
close
with the
grip as well.
internal shoulder rotation.
Yeah, he loves it. But yeah, like in terms of, and his leg days as well would be brutal. I know that might not sound as bad, but it'd be like do barbell back squats, then do hack squats, and then do a pause leg press. It's stuff like that where it's very intense. Whereas AJ's is more, it's still intense, but it's like we're gonna throw these machines in with a D handle, let's say, and doing that kind of stuff, more science-based training, if you want to call it that. So they had the same approach outside of training, but I think with training it was a little bit different. And obviously Keithy's one of these guys that trains 7 days a week, so he never encourages that. But he likes to throw in like a bro split as well, whereas AJ's in the past was push pull legs, stuff like that. So it's very similar, but yeah, it's just their training that's different. And
Yeah.
maybe their aspect of food as well, because I think Keith is a little bit more lenient with pushing up, because he pushed me up big time.
So would you say it doesn't matter which coach we're talking about,
Yeah.
but with the push up, is it more pushing up towards the food aspect or the training? What would you normally bias more so?
It's the food for them, for both of them. So Keithy's was pretty much, Keithy's was normally just the same training for X amount of weeks until something was going wrong. Like if I was saying, oh, this movement isn't going well, this movement isn't going well, or weights, like the weight just isn't staying, or it's like slacking or going down, then they'd change it up, or there'd be like a periodization transition. But yeah, Keithy was heavy with the food. So it'd be like, if you're in off season, most of the week it's going up. Like it's nothing with protein. It's just the carbs basically going up. With AJ, like I said, I wasn't there too long, so I can't really remember what he gave me. But I know with AJ, I was in a dieting phase at the time, so
Oh,
it would be more, yeah, it'd be more strict and then pushing up.
fair enough. Interesting. And would you say it's like predicated on your or one's ability to digest all that food, or in reflection of their training performance?
So I think it's a mixture of both. So I think it's a mixture of how training goes. Like I'm one of these people that will film a lot of my sets, so he can kind of see what I'm doing anyway, so he knows how training performance is going. And then also it's the look. Like he never wanted me to get too sloppy, so if anything was getting too much, then he would just pause the increase of food. um but yeah, like it was one of the things where Keithy had me on social, so he could see everything I was getting up to, because I'm not I post all the time, so he could see what I was doing.
Yeah. So going back to obviously the preliminary there, we were saying about when you started your bodybuilding career, which was 2020, technically, that's when you took it all seriously. So you'd say you've been training for 3 years, coming up to 4 years now. So that's how long you've been natural. Are you still seeing, would you say, like significant progression, adequate progression, no progression? Is it?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's adequate progression. Like it's hard. Obviously, as a natural competitor, it is hard to put muscle on full stop. Like it can get difficult when it gets to a certain point. Obviously, this is where, again, like you said about genetics, this is where that can come in with a natural, because sometimes they can progress a little bit more. But with myself, like definitely in terms of strength increase as well, it's definitely gone up a lot since 2020 at least. But in terms of like muscle size, it's still getting there. I think as I'm getting older, the muscle maturity is coming along, and it is getting a lot better than what it was.
Is your strength still increasing exponentially, or is it more like linear now?
Yeah, it's pretty linear now. Like it went, especially after America, it was very, it was awful, and then like slowly it started going back to how it used to be.
I
Um,
reckon I reckon being in America was like some nostalgia of 2020, right? Because
oh,
obviously I saw
don't.
some of your stories. You were basically training with the bare minimum again. It was just like,
Yeah, I was literally doing
was it like
lockdown training.
a broomstick and some
I had
paint,
I
paint
had
pots?
I had rusty like a one of them 5 foot barbells that weighed, I don't even know how much. Must have weighed like honestly like 2 kilo. And
Yeah.
then I had 10 pound plates, and that was all I had.
Yeah, I
So I was
remember
just
Just
seeing
doing
the stories.
just to jump in on something you said then.
yeah.
Obviously, like you said, that AJ's style was very scientific,
Mhm.
or science-based approach. Keithy was very much old school. In terms of obviously you were dieting with AJ, so it's not really a fair comparison. In terms of strength progression, and obviously if both were in an off-season phase or a gaining phase, where did you find strength progressed more, or progress there was more progression with the science-based or with the old school approach? So I think as a natural athlete, you're probably in a better position to kind of determine which. I know everyone's going to be different. You're always going to grow more from what you enjoy, but
Yeah.
where do you think the holy grail was between the two?
That's a really good question.
Honestly, I actually preferred the old school. Like I thought the old school helped a lot, because
I
there was a
was about
point
to
where
click the stop record button then.
no,
Put
there
me
was
out
a
of
point.
business.
There was a point, honestly, with Keithy. I remember doing the stiff legs, and he said to me, "You're going to do 180 kilo for as many as you can, and you're not stopping until you get to 15." Because I kept going 13, 13, 13. He was like, "Until we get to 15, you're not stopping." And it was just that approach of just like, okay. And then straight after that, you're on heavy T-bar rows, and it's like, fucking hell. But it honestly, it's a lot of fun because it teaches you a lot. So I definitely prefer, and I think the old school did help a lot more.
Yeah.
I know obviously with myself being heavily science based when it comes to exercise biomechanics, I do feel as if, and I feel like I'm going to contradict myself here and cause some controversy, but it can teach more people to become lazier with the whole science-based approach. Because let's just use the prevalent example of the whole lat pull down with the D handle, and it's all about the internal cues of squeezing. So I do think you're right there in terms of the basics, the meat and potatoes. It teaches you to train, and I think we spoke about this. Go on, what you could say?
I think the issue with old school training is people look at Ronnie and Branch Warren, for example, and that's what they see as old school training. Now, I
Yeah,
would say my approach is very much more old school than science based, but I still run by the thesis of form, then intensity, then weight. Which, if you break it down, form is going back to what you would say specializing, where your biomechanics come into it and getting that connection.
yeah.
I just think the difference is like when you draw the two together, it would be just be more movement and equipment choices and maybe exercise selection as opposed to the actual technique. And I think that's where people get lost in the debate.
Yeah, I agree. But going back to what I was saying, it's just like you can become relatively lazier because it's the whole, oh, just focusing on the internal cues of just squeezing, really feeling the muscle. But if you've got Keithy's approach where you've got the deadlifts and then immediately after that, you're going into a T-bar row, you've got no choice. You've got to get that done. It's teaching hard work in those sessions.
Yeah, and
I like,
it was never like it was never like an old school approach where they would just lift for the sake of lifting it. It was still in that scientific cue of, okay, form needs to come first, and then once we do that, the intensity comes. It was the same, exactly the same as like any other person would try to train, but it was just doing, like you said, the meat and potato movements with that.
yeah,
Because I know a lot of enhanced people more so than I do natural, and
because they're better.
it comes back to the training, whether like you, like, although you're very much like science based, you train harder. Like I don't necessarily agree with all of the movements that AJ would do or anything, but he clearly trains hard. You can see in his videos he trains hard.
Yeah,
I think that's all it is. I don't care how you train, just train
I
hard.
I concur. I concur. I always say it doesn't really matter if you're science based or if you're basic, whatever it is, as long as you're training hard, as long as you're seeing results, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant what style of training you're doing. As long as I can see hard work being put into your training sessions and those sets, and I'm seeing progression within your physique development, then the proof's in the pudding. Nothing else needs to be debated.
Yeah, so like I was just gonna say, so me and you trained a handful of times together, and it was definitely like, as much as you say scientific based, there was still a lot of it was still a lot of form with strength as well, and it was a lot of that old school mentality as well. Like we did a lot of deadlift and RDLs and things. Like it was exactly the same as what I had with Keithy, basically.
Yeah,
I think like
So
just veering off the subject too much, I think the key outlier being natural is whether you do the meat and potato or you take that more scientific approach, that connection and initiating the muscle and making sure that you're doing everything right in terms of how you would preach the science-based approach with the connection and the biomechanics. That's where it's more, I think it's more relevant in the natural world. It's relevant in both, but I feel like if you're just going in there and you're enhanced and you're throwing weight around, there's still going to be a degree where the enhancement will enable you to grow that little bit more so. But if you haven't got that enhancement, you need to be far more meticulous with your training, whatever style you take to approach.
yeah, yeah, I agree. So I think obviously the question, how long should we remain natural before we take that leap? I think the question is obviously why? Why would we want to remain natural, first of all? Anybody want to jump in?
Um, Moral standpoint, I think is a big one. Like there is always the argument, it's in theory what we should all preach, max out your natural potential before you do anything.
Mhm.
Obviously there's future commitments or things that you might want, like children, etc. Obviously that's got to be something you've got to be mindful of, fertility and health. Um, Family health history in itself.
Yeah.
That's the outlier that you've got to take. But then as a caveat to that, what are your goals? If you're clearly in a position genetically where you think, I could make this, and you're 18, 19, and this is, I'm not advocating this at all. If you're in a position at 18, 19 where you're clearly a genetic freak and you're thinking, I want to turn pro, who would I as a coach be like, nope, max out your natural potential. You're not going on gear till you're 25. It's a very great, I think it's a very grey area and one to kind of determine. I think the moral standpoint should go for most, max out your natural potential. But I think beyond that, it's a very grey area.
I think under the same umbrella is to contextualize. Obviously, if we're looking at being a competitive athlete, you've got to think
Yeah.
about prolonging the timeline or the time frame of your competitive years. If you're jumping on PEDs 17, 18, 19, whatever age, at a very early age, you're already shortening that time frame of how long you can be
Yeah.
competing for. So why not take advantage of that being natural so that you can prolong that time frame for competing longer?
No, I'm not against that. I'm
Mm.
not against that at all.
And then you got something to say, Darren, or?
no, I was just gonna say, like like how both of you said, there should be a point where you've maxed out your potential, but I think there's a point of as well, it's like, why not, if you are natural, why not compete in a natural federation to start off with to see if you even like the process of it? Because for all you know, you could not even do a show and just go straight onto be enhanced. But then, if your goal is to compete and be an IFBB pro, what if you do one show and you absolutely hate it?
Yeah.
You've just made that jump, and then it's all down. It's all just, and then you've got these. You might have these health issues, and you might have some roadblocks in the future. So it's one of the things where I think you should, if you are going to do it, at least try to do one show natural and see how if you enjoy the process first.
Yeah. I think one of the unfortunate issues with, obviously, why not go natural first of all, is most of the natural federations are just not as popular in comparison to the assisted federations. And obviously we've now got PCA, Two Bros doing natural shows, but there's only one or two that they do across a calendar season. But the actual what, UK DFBA,
Yeah.
Yeah, UK.
yeah, yeah, all of those, they're not as popular. They're not really as mainstream in comparison. So I think when you see a lot of people who are natural, the first thing they're exposed to is PCA, Two Bros, FitX. So they're seeing those standards, and the mass majority of those people competing there are assisted. So
I think
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with your point, Darren, that you should take that leap into the natural realms to begin with, just to kind of get your toes wet. But I think the downfall is that there's just not as much exposure for those natural federations, so they're not seeing that.
There is that. I also think from a psychological aspect, and I don't know if I'm kind of putting a bit of my own personality out there, so to speak. I think when you look at people who start training for the genuine love of training, who I would say AJ is probably one of them, Keith is definitely one of them. They're progressing. They see no need at this point, if ever, or if they're ever going to do it, to become enhanced. They're there for the bodybuilding. They genuinely love the sport, and they're just there to do it for them. I think with enhancement, a lot of people don't necessarily do it for the bodybuilding. I'm not saying they don't enjoy bodybuilding and love the process, but we're all men. We all look at the pictures of like the big guys. We want to be like that. We want those arms. We want no. Well, not many people want big legs because they're just fannies. But like people look at these physiques and it's an ego thing or an insecurity thing. And I think most of the decisions that people take in terms of enhancement is either because of impatience or just the fact that they just want to beat their chest. They want to look a certain way. And I think it's more psychological actually in terms of an ego boost or a dick extension, as opposed to just a sensible decision, if that makes sense.
All I know, on a less serious note, is you're going to clip that dick extension. That's going on your Instagram as a reel. I know it now. But no, jokes aside, I completely agree.
No, but look, I do think it's a case because at the end of the day, unless you just fall into bodybuilding because you've got an older brother that lifts or a dad that lifts, or you just walk into a gym as for like, from another sport or something, and you just fall in love with the training. A lot of people that walk into the gym and want to be a big guy, not necessarily a competitive bodybuilder, but a bodybuilder nonetheless.
Yeah.
They're insecure in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not saying that's a negative because we all have insecurities. But that's where I think the decision to go into enhancement comes from with a hell of a lot of people, because they're so eager to improve themselves for whatever reason that it just makes that decision so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think also while we're on this topic, I think it probably very responsible us to outline that if you're in that position where you're a natural and you're thinking of going enhanced, not many people talk about post bodybuilding. It's like, I know for a fact I will never be able to stop TRT.
Yeah.
I'll never come off TRT. And I think when having a podcast about natty or enhanced, I think that's a discussion that's worth having, because outside of the competitive timeline, there are far more detrimental effects and lifestyle effects that this will have beyond those years.
Yeah.
I think it'd be very irresponsible of us to
Yeah,
say.
I'm pretty
Well,
sure I've mentioned this a couple of times on some of the previous episodes that the the majority of people are always thinking just in the moment. It's thinking, okay, what they're doing now, what they're going to do tomorrow, what they're going to do for this competitive season. But everything has a shelf life. You know, your competitive, I mean, especially as competitive bodybuilders, it's not that long of a career. It's what,
no.
at the max 15 years, some if you could stretch to 20 years, so anywhere between 10 to 15 years for the general average. So there's always going to be that shelf life to it. So it's always a case of thinking what's going to happen after once you're done.
Yeah. And I think for men, for males, we're quite lucky in the sense that, okay, I'd have to do TRT, but
Hmm.
then how many of the male population that have never been in a gym are on TRT anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, there's issues like gyno, which unless you're stage lean, most people wouldn't even know if they've got it. I think from another aspect is from the female point of view, if you're going to look at enhancement from a female point of view, virilization, the majority of it is irreversible. So if you're taking that leap into enhancement, especially if you're looking at androgens, it's a very, very, I think, careful decision to make if you're going to make that jump. Because once you enter that realm of virilization, there's not a lot you can do to reverse it, if at all.
Yeah, it sounds like you're trying to persuade them against taking
No,
steroids.
no,
We're supposed to be
I think it's
we're
very
supposed to be
personal
pro.
choice. No, I am. But
Come on, you're meant to convince me right now.
Yeah.
What's going
no,
on?
but I think and obviously I know how you are with some of your clients, Harry. It's you have to have that frank discussion.
I know, for
And
sure.
there are too many coaches out there that will just be like, right, we need to progress. You know, figure girls that have never even done a figure class, they just aspire to be figure, going on to testosterone and stuff like that. Like, just fuck off. Like, if these coaches don't have the conversations of this is the possible risks that you're taking,
Yeah.
then it's irresponsible. But then on the caveat to that, if you can sit there as a coach and have these discussions with your clients and they're like, look, I trust you as a coach. You know what you're on about. You've given me both sides of the story. You've given me the science. You've given me the names of other coaches to refer to or literature to read. I am happy with this decision. Grab the syringe happily. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, bend over, stick it in.
I'm just trying to be the responsible. I'm not trying to be a responsible coach. It's just how I approach my clients.
No, for sure.
We're all paid to follow instruction. If your client comes to you and said, "This is my goal," it is our job to get them there in the fastest, safest way possible.
Yeah.
Now, if someone comes to me and says, "I want to do this. I want to be enhanced. I want to take this route," as long as I have had that conversation with them, I will support any goal they've got, unless I think it's just there's a very serious reason as to why they shouldn't do it. At that point, I'll be like, maybe I'm not your guy. Go speak to someone else.
Yeah.
But I'm not anti-steroids at all. I mean,
I was only kidding with you. But that is obviously that's being sensible. It's being reasonable, and ultimately, it's taken into consideration the longevity of that individual and their quality of life. Not just thinking because I mean, it's easy for a lot of us, especially as coaches, to get lost in that moment where you get this new client that comes on, they're natural, but they have good potential. And then you're like, do you know what? I'm getting excited now. Let's jump on gear. Let's do this. You're going to blow up. You're going to be massive. We can win a load of regionals, pro qualifiers, blah, blah. So you get lost in the moment, but you have to also respect the well-being of that individual, the quality of their life and the longevity of their life as well. So it's, yeah.
And I think if you are pro enhanced and you can't have that conversation, you shouldn't be pro anything. You should go back and get a normal job. You shouldn't be in this business.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to direct a question now to you, Darren, because obviously we sound like obviously it remaining natural, it prolongs the time frame of competing. But let's say now, last time you competed was when?
22.
So how many shows did you do?
I only did the one. I did
Only one.
BMBF, and then that was it.
Where did you place?
I don't know. So basically, we went into a novice class. Don't understand how it was judged because it was all different sizes and weights and heights and stuff. But I remember there was 17 or 18 of us on stage at once, and they were just
Are you supposed
like
to
they
judge 18 competitors?
I don't know. And I'm standing next to someone who's 94 kilo and like 6'3", and
Who?
I'm 5'7", and I was like, I don't even know, low 70 kilo.
That's
I
mad.
don't understand how it was
Okay.
judged.
Okay, so the long and short of that is you didn't place anywhere.
No.
So the question I'm asking, I'm trying to allude towards is, so let's say hypothetically speaking, you compete this year, you're placing on average fourth, third most of the shows. Would that be any kind of indication to you that you might not be genetically gifted to push up your placings any further? Would that give you any kind of sway or conviction of going to the assisted route? Where would you say is like, where's the cutoff point for you where you're like, okay, well, I've eked out my genetic potential naturally, so now I either have to accept my fate or I then take that leap into the assisted realm?
Yeah, so I think for me, the personality I have from growing up, I'm very competitive. So for me, unless I was honestly winning, if I was winning you like shot like winning not open shows, sorry, regional shows, and I was winning them or coming second at least, like around that spot, and then I would be maybe going on it. But then again, I am 26. There is a lifespan to this. And it would also be, if I had the coach, it would be a discussion that I would have with them, and I'd want them to be completely honest. And I'm not someone that goes off just one person's voice. I would like to get multiple opinions. But for me, yeah, like I think I'd want to place in regionals, but I'd want to do it in a few different shows rather than just one. So I don't think one really dictates how well you can do. I think if you're placing in multiple shows and you're doing well, it might give you an indication of, okay, we can maybe push this. But even for me now, I still don't think I'd go on it even if I did win, because I don't know how, for me personally, how my bodybuilding is, because I'm kind of on and off with things sometimes. So
Yeah.
it's one of the things where I wouldn't jump on because my goal was never to get to that stage. It was just I wanted to compete and see how I got on.
Okay. So then
So when it
oh, go on. Go on, Lewis.
also when it comes to maxing out your natural potential as a natural athlete, where do you stand and being like, right, I am completely natural. I'm just going to eat my food and train, sleep, recover, and then you kind of like you've got enhancement over here in this little grey area here. You've got things like your himbine L-carnitine or injectable L-carnitine, certain compounds that aren't on the WADA ban list, but would technically, in my eyes, make you enhanced. Where do you sit in that realm? And are you
Yeah,
still within that realm? Are you still at the point where I'm still maxing out my natural ability? Or do you think it's kind of a shady area where like, no, no, you are now enhanced. You're bending the rules or playing to the rules.
yeah. So I would see it as bending the rules. So if I was to ever take anything like that, I would consider myself on more on the enhanced side and natural. So I wouldn't compete in a natural federation if that was the case.
Even
If I was taking that anyway, I'd be like, why don't I just go for, like, why don't I just get the advice and go for more, like get more
Why don't I
of
just go
the
balls
other.
deep and just take trend, basically?
Yeah, yeah. Why not just inject me of everything and just go for it?
I think where natural competitors and that natural potential is concerned, things like injectable L-carnitine, your himbine, I don't think testosterone's on the WADA list yet.
No, it's not.
Ecdystrone's not on the WADA list yet. Tonka Ali's not on the list yet. So
They
it's
all
like
will be soon, though.
you've got these enhancers, but then you are technically, according to WADA, which is the kind of outlier of what all these federations follow their list, you're technically still natural. So because it's obviously not adding an exogenous compound into your body, you're still just maximizing your body's natural production. Do you think that's not natural at all? Or you should be an enhanced federation or doing enhanced shows or non-tested federations at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's person dependent. But for me, if I was winning shows doing that, I wouldn't feel right about it.
What if you
I
were
would be
beat
like, that's
doing
just,
that?
What about the other way round?
Yeah, what if you were beat by someone doing that?
Yeah.
I'd be pissed off. But I wouldn't. Like it. The end of the day, like if that happens, like I'm one of these people that can accept it, but I also think for them, it's a very shady thing for them to do, and it's a low blow at the end of the day.
But then I
Like
suppose if you were to jump into an enhanced and you were to just run a cycle of basic compounds, basic lipolytics, but then you got beat by a guy that had used growth hormone and diuretics, would you have the same opinion?
No, I mean I get where you're coming from, but like for me, if you are on that stuff, then it's a level playing field. But not everyone knows about these like secret ways of on the natural scene. Not everyone
Yeah,
knows
good
about
point.
this. So for me, it's just like it's just a no go. I mean, there's probably loads of people that have done it, but for me personally, it's just one of the things where I could not do that. Like if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it properly and not win it using the secret methods.
If I find a YouTube video of you diving on a football field to win a pen,
Yeah, when you see it.
The second part of the question was, so now let's say, hypothetically speaking, the other end of the spectrum, you're now winning all of your shows. Okay, you're like the king natty. Would would that would that just make you want to stay in the natural federations and just keep winning those titles, or would you ever get bored of it? I know obviously this is all hypothetical, so it's just like a off of
Yeah.
a plausibility, but would would that not want you to try and challenge yourself to the next level and then go assisted, or would you rather just stay there? Because I know like AJ in particular, he's very good. He's won a lot of shows and he's remained natural. But what about yourself?
Yeah, well, that was what I was gonna bring up. Is like someone like AJ, for example, is known as like not the king, not the natty king, let's say for physique wise, but in terms of like marketing wise,
yeah, for
everyone
him,
is
I
that
think
is the
for him
go to.
it's a business. If
Yeah,
he were to go enhanced, he wouldn't be a Cuba, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
So I think for him, more for just quality of life generally,
yeah,
it would be detrimental to his business and to his marketing image to do anything but be natural.
yeah.
And I think there comes a point in every athlete's life. I'd say you're kind of there with your competitiveness and your competitive career and
Hmm.
coaching. There comes a point where your coaching and your marketing and beyond bodybuilding becomes more prevalent than actually your competitive career. And I think from AJ's perspective, I think he's kind of a bad example in that because he's now got such a business come from promoting natural bodybuilding. It would be idiotic for him to do anything else.
Yeah, it'd be detrimental because if he was to transition, he'll just become just another competitor. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
If
agree.
you rewind in 5 years because it would take him X amount of time to build up the muscle mass to be competitive on the enhanced scene at the level he's at now
Yeah,
in relation.
yeah. I mean, when you're at the top of the pecking order and everything,
yeah.
So,
So
go on, carry on, Darren.
sorry, no, I was gonna say to answer the question about what I would do is, I think it's one of the things where it becomes a goal dependent thing. Like, because like I said before, I didn't know if I didn't want to ever go enhanced or get an IFBB Pro card or whatever. So if it come to the point where I was winning regionals and the goal shifted and I was like, okay, maybe I do want to test myself in a different like aspect, and yeah, like I would try it. Like I'm not afraid. I've never wanted to do it, but it has been in my head. Like I have thought about it a lot. Like I wonder what would happen. Like that simulation thing of like I wonder what I would look like if I did do this and stuck to it. Like was very meticulous with what I was doing. I wonder what I would look like. But for me personally, I think if I was winning regionals back to back, it would just be a goal dependent shift. It would just be dependent on psychological.
I
yeah.
mean, from an enhanced perspective, when you made your shift, Harry, from natty to enhanced, in hindsight now, with obviously a lot more knowledge than you probably had back then, would you have done anything different?
I mean, apart from the initial cycle that I ran, not really. I mean,
In terms
going,
of timelines or the age you were at or the stage you were at in your bodybuilding
so
progression?
I was a late bloomer I came into just the bodybuilding scene altogether. I was like 22, 20, yeah, about 22, 23. Because before that I was suffering with my anorexia and everything, so I was in a really bad spot prior to kind of finding bodybuilding. But I don't know, because going back to the point that I was making earlier about, unfortunately, the natty federations and just natural athletes and bodybuilders not really that mainstream. When I got into it, I was just influenced by the people who I was surrounded by in my environment. That's why I said like environment is a key aspect as well.
Yeah.
But the people that I was surrounded by were all juiced up. So the gym that I used to train at was Metroflex in Lower Sydenham. Everybody in there, it's a proper hardcore bodybuilding orientated gym. They're all juiced up. So my father as well. So I don't know whether I'd want to change anything, because when I got into bodybuilding, I just wanted to be the biggest guy in the gym. That was it. So I don't think obviously I'd have been able to be that person if I stayed natural. So I don't think I would have done anything different. Maybe obviously like I said, I would have changed the cycle that I ran. I would have probably, if I have the knowledge that I have now, going back to when I started, it would be a case of, okay, get the not even if I had the knowledge now, because obviously I'll just know what to do. If I just had if I wasn't as naive, if I
Yeah.
had the experience that I have now, and the maturity that I have, it would be, I would go back to the old me and say, go out there and do your research, go find resources, go talk to other people. But again, 22, what's that? I was like 2012. Social media wasn't that big back then. There weren't a
Yeah.
lot of online coaches. There wasn't the level of content that we have now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
that's
think
what.
that's something you said there. That's another important aspect. Like I very much live my life like I'm here for a good time, not a long time.
Mm.
And I think it's also important to look back on, like, say you're sat here now saying, looking back, probably wouldn't have done anything different in terms of timeline. Maybe there's aspects of like cycles and stuff that you would have changed, but in terms of like when you decided to become enhanced or not, you wouldn't change it. Whereas obviously you're Darren, like you Darren, you might sit there when you're 30 or whatever, and your bodybuilding career's over. You might look back and be like, I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd done that sooner. And I think having that ability to, well, this is what I want to do with my life. Do I want to do it? Which element of full potential do I want to reach? I think that's important to consider as well. Not so much foresight, but also the ability to have that foreseeing hindsight as well.
Yeah. And again, to reverberate what I was saying as well, it's a lot easier now for people to have that hindsight, because how much influence they have from
Yeah.
social media, and that plethora of content and coaches, knowledge, all of that out there now. So what about yourself, Lewis? Would you say it's the same answer? You won't really change anything?
Oh, to say you were a late bloomer, I pretty much jumped out of the grave to start bodybuilding. I think I was 29 when I
Oh,
got into
really?
bodybuilding. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Um, I was just a fat doorman before that. Um, so for me, I mean, I started off my journey in a community leisure centre. I just went there to look for like different reasons. I just went to lose weight. I kind of maxed out the 30 kilo dumbbells in the community leisure centre. I was like, I just need to find another gym. And there was a spit and sawdust gym up the road, only a small gym. But I walked in and I saw the guy that was behind the counter. I was like, fuck. Like he was close to 18 stone. Because I remember him weighing himself, and he was in good nick for 18 stone as well. And I was just like, I want to look like that.
Yeah.
I'd always swore up until that point, was never interested in competing, never wanted to be massive, but never touched steroids. Like my dad was 51 when he died of heart failure through steroid use, not bodybuilding orientated, like post-cancer recovery steroid use. But I was like totally against it at the time, and I was like, fuck this. I want to look like that. I don't care if I end up dead at 51 like my dad. That's what I want to look like in the meantime. And like literally I was like, I want to become a bodybuilder. What do I do? Have you heard of Sustanon and tamoxifen? Nope. What is it? And that was it. Straight in, straight on. Went up to his office once a week, straight in my ass. Like, and that was my journey. In hindsight, would I change it? Hell no. Because I've took so much from bodybuilding as a person
Yeah.
that it's made who I am now. So I wouldn't change a single thing. But I never had that opportunity to, again, like I didn't know anyone into bodybuilding. Instagram wasn't around. Social media wasn't there. It was
Yeah.
literally just that little gym with 100 members, that I was like, this is my social media. So that was what I took from it, and I wouldn't go back and change anything at all because I think I'm a better person for bodybuilding, and that was the route that got me to where I am now.
Yeah,
So
100%. I think obviously in hindsight, everything happens for a reason. And if we're all, collectively in an agreement where we're happy with where we are in our lives now, why would we want to go back and change that timeline?
yeah, I mean, again, you, I would have, um, I would have done my research more so. And I said, well, I did my research, but I don't think UK Muscle was a great place to do research. Like I remember times when like Tren is the holy grail, and I remember the once I was like, oh, I thought, oh, what would 400 milligram be like? And I was just like, but yeah, that was a very short stint. But do you know what I mean? So there's obviously again cycle design that I would have done completely different. But in
Yeah.
terms of going back on usage, no, I'd have not done anything different.
Yeah, I wouldn't have pursued the career naturally to begin with. I mean, obviously, there's always up until a point where we were training naturally. But when I made that transition to be assisted, I wouldn't change that. I wouldn't change it and say I would go an extra 1, 2, 3, 4 years of being natural.
No,
See,
not at all.
Dash has made an appearance
Yep. He's now down the floor.
back on the floor.
It's a little slinky.
Yes. Right, I
So
think.
look, your prep naturally, Darren.
Oh, go on.
How arduous did you find it? I mean, obviously, like you're friends with Harry, who's enhanced, and you've obviously watched him through prep.
Yeah.
In terms of like the difference between a prep natty and a prep enhanced, how would you say like the dog end of prep where it's really hard? Would you say you would find it easier as a natty, or obviously going off, like say, the experiences you've just seen Harry go through or other friends go through as enhanced? Would you say there's much difference that maybe sway you to change in that sense?
I think the only thing is like for like we were saying about natties relying on only certain aspects of things. Like we're only relying on the food and recovery to help us really. So when it comes to that dog end of prep, it's one of them things where and it's the same with enhanced, like everything hurts and there's nothing to really aid that. You just gotta it sounds bad, you just gotta suck it up. It's one of them things where you just gotta suck it up. I think it's more post show rather than anything is what sways me more for the enhanced side and the natural. Because I think post show um I never got my blood works done, but I can imagine if I got blood works done post show, it would have been horrendous
Yeah,
because everything was just horrible after. Like I'm pretty sure my testosterone would have been on the floor in regards to that. But um, I'm obviously I don't know what the dog end of prep for enhanced feels like, but I know for a natty it was, especially for the first time and being, I think I did it for 24 weeks. That end of that final few weeks was horrible. Like it was very difficult. I couldn't, like walking was a chore.
yeah.
Going up the stairs was a chore at that point. Um, and yeah, it's just I think it's more energy levels rather than anything. It's just like I said, you're only relying on certain things to keep you going. And when you've got barely any foods in your system, it's, well, for me anyway, it's not gonna it's not looking good.
A bit of a controversial one. Taking science out of it and comparisons to enhanced friends, would you say it's harder to get peeled as a natter?
I
In
don't.
your opinion?
It's a hard one. Like I don't think it's harder because I don't think there's as much muscle to condition. So I think it gets to a point where I think a lot of naturals can be in very good condition. And I think it's just one of the things where you're just going to lose muscle size and it becomes quote unquote a skinny look, and you just become more conditioned because of a skinnier look. I actually think it might be harder for an enhanced person to be conditioned rather than a. But I'd like to hear your guys' take on that as well.
I agree. I think it's definitely harder.
The only reason why I asked this, I had a debate with someone on Instagram before because they had posted some pictures from natty athletes that were inside out, and they'd made a point of this person's natty. And my point was like, what difference does that make? I think it's equally as hard. You've got far less tools to manipulate your certain look. So there's a lot less things to play with. It's either food or expenditure, really, that you're going to kind of juggle between to get the look. And people are like, well, if you add in lipolytics or you add in diuretics or whatever, other compounds, it's going to be easier. But then there's so many more variables to manage, there's also a lot more to go wrong. So I actually don't think I just think it's a completely different, it's like comparing chess and drafts to me, really.
Yeah, I think
Because
the other aspect of the equation as well is obviously as an assisted athlete, we tend to hyperfixate on the fullness and not losing muscle tissue. So that's why I don't think necessarily it's harder for assisted athletes to get in condition, but they don't get into condition because they're so hyperfixated on that fullness and they don't want to lose that tissue. So as soon as they get an even ounce of flatness within their physique, it's like refeed, and that's what's holding them back. Whereas I've seen natural athletes, they're pushing, they'll just push regardless because, as you said, they keep chiseling away at the adiposity. They get to the point where they're that skinny fat look, but they're just getting more conditioned.
I think in terms of food and stuff and energy, it's relevant because obviously you're on less food because you weigh less. Someone being enhanced is generally going to weigh more, so their calorie output and calorie needs is completely different. So yeah, we have more food, but then we probably feel as shit. You'd look at an Olympian level athlete, they're probably dug end of prep. Looks like 3,000 calories a day. To them, that's like starvation. Whereas to you, it'd be like peak off season. So I think it's just relative in terms of food and lethargy and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think on that climatic ending, we will wrap up the episode here.
And
It was a very good episode. Obviously, Darren, again, thank you for joining us at short notice.
No problem.
First and foremost, shout out, because I always forget, shout out to the sponsors, Your Protein. As always, you can use my discount code TBW10 to get 10% discount on all of your orders. We'll put obviously the details for the website down in the description, so you can go check them out on there. As for yourself, Lewis, thanks for joining. Obviously, we'll see you next week. Darren, we'll see you in the future on another episode.
Okay.
As always, guys, thank you for tuning in and listening. Show your support as always. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop a comment. And if you're listening on Spotify,
and follow the new Instagram page.
Jesus, I can't speak today. Don't forget
And follow the new Instagram page as well. You've set up the new Instagram page, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm going to add that one in there as well. So yeah, Spotify, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and give us a review. And also check out our new Instagram account. It's Warrior Unfiltered Podcast. It's actually Warrior Unfiltered _podcast. Yeah, and we'll see you all on the next episode.